Hello and welcome to Lion and Mouse Commentary. I'm Holland and this is my best friend Tori.
Hi.
If you're new to our show, we rank various forms of entertainment out of a total score of 10 with only 2 points allowed for our personal taste. Don't worry, we break down everything as we go. Feel free to agree, disagree, or just find something new to enjoy. Just be sure to tread lightly. There will be hot takes and spoilers ahead. Cut to the intro.
That really well. Did you practice?
No.
Oh, wow.
Nope, it's just in the noggin.
I'll never, ever, ever do the whole opening without looking at the script.
Yep. Nope.
Right.
I just got it locked away.
Nice job.
I think part of it is also because I wrote our intro script.
That's true.
So it comes a little bit more naturally to me because I wrote it. Mm-hmm. So I feel like Thomas Jefferson. Don't like surprise you guys because I wrote it.
Yeah.
Anyways, this is our third and final installment covering Redwall Season 1, the television series. So if you haven't listened to our first 2 episodes covering this content, go ahead and click back and watch those videos. But in case you couldn't read the title, we're going to be covering Redwall Season 1, episodes, 9 through 13?
Yep.
Yeah, 9 through 13. So just a very brief recap. I do a little bit more thorough introduction, but Redwall, the animated television series, was a 3-season adaptation of Redwall, Matameo, and Martin the Warrior books that was originally broadcast from 1999 until 2002. It was produced by Nelvana, a Canadian animation studio, and each episode is around 22 minutes in length, or 30 minutes with commercials. Brian Jakes was involved with productions and the story. He was consulted for those. It first aired September 12th, 1999, and the final episode aired February 19th, 2001. And that was in Canada. In the US, the first episode aired on April 1st, 2001, and the series finale aired July 28th, 2002. So if you grew up in the US or Canada, you probably remember it in different portions of your childhood. And a 4th season was originally planned, but the show was canceled for a planned film adaptation that was never produced. So we covered the first 8 episodes in our prior podcast episodes. So here's a bit of a synopsis or recap of episode 8, which is what we covered in our last podcast episode. So I'll read that brief synopsis, and then we're going to be covering episodes 9 through 13, which I'll give you the titles of as well. So episode 8's synopsis says, conspiring with Matthias, Constance builds a huge crossbow and shoots Clooney, but Clooney uses a substitute and escapes her arrow. Unknown to Redwall, he plans an attack with a huge movable siege tower. The Abbey is saved when courageous Cornflower single-handedly burns it down. Only then does the Abbey realize that Clooney is still alive, and only Cornflower stood between them and disaster. Matthias and Cornflower become even closer warrior friends. Episodes 9 through 13 are titled. Episode 9 is titled The Visitor. Episode 10 is called A Favor Returned. Episode 11 is called Asmodeus. Episode 12 is called Underground. And episode 13 is called The Final Conflict. And this concludes the content of book 1 of Redwall, which is just entitled Redwall. So we also cover that book on a prior episode of our podcast. So if you want to hear us talk about the book, you can go listen to that. But Tori's going to kick us off with our first category.
Okay, so for TV shows, our first category is plot, story, and cohesion. This also includes resolution through a season. And since these are the final episodes of this season, we are going to talk about the resolution a little bit. So we allot up to 2 points for this, and I gave this 1 point out of 2. So half credit. Very middle of the road for me. So let me just go ahead and get out of my system. When we talked about episodes 5 to 8, my biggest issue was that they take all of episode 5 and they create a new plot that doesn't exist in the book, and they waste valuable time, in my opinion, on that. That at the end of the day, it didn't really change anything. It happens again in this chunk of episodes. So in episode 9, we have this new plot that doesn't exist in the book, which is that there's this like traveling merchant guy or whatever, and his name is Farlow, and he is convinced by Clooney to go and like infiltrate the Abbey or whatever. And there's this like spat/fight disagreement thing happening between Matthias and Cornflower. Because Matthias keeps basically like blowing her off when she's like, hey, I need help with this. And he's like, yeah, okay. And then he just doesn't, which I get that, you know, anyway, it's another 22 minutes of created plot when we could have been spending that time fleshing out already established plot and characters. And I just felt like at the end of the episode, it didn't matter. Because nothing that happens in this episode really gets carried forward into episodes 10, 11, 12, or 13 in regards to like change in plot direction or goals or motivations. There's not even any real character growth other than the fact that like at the end Matthias like apologizes for blowing off Cornflower. Okay, so I had a big problem with that again. I was really hoping that wouldn't happen twice in one 13 episode season, and it did. There's just all this extra time is created or is given to these newly created plots, and it takes away from the main flow. I do like that finally in episode 10 we get the quest that I've been waiting for forever. And Matthias leaves, and then 3 minutes later, he turns around, come back, and I was like, what are you doing? That's the world's shortest quest. I've never seen anything so... I just wanted Matthias to leave and stay gone for at least an episode.
I just have to go ahead and piggyback on that because my notes literally say, episode 10, finally going for Martin's sword to Asmodeus. JK.
I wrote, okay, quest time is finally happening in episode 10, and then in all caps, and he goes back? Question mark. I just wanted forward movement at this point. We are in the final section of this season. Everything happening here should feel urgent, important, and with a stake high enough that I want to be rooting for these characters the whole time. This, okay, I'm going for Martin's sword, and then turn around, go back home 3 minutes later, interrupts that.
It does.
And it really, really frustrated me. The stakes are rising in these episodes, but that really doesn't start to happen until episode 11. So 11, 12, and 13, I felt like, okay, at least we feel that the tension is rising. Everybody is acting accordingly to that. It's not like, you know, anybody feels dismissive or flippant at this point. And I do think that in episode, I think it's episode 11, it could be 12. You may have to give me those titles again. But the sequence where they finally reached Asmodeus and he's slain by Martin's sword, I thought that sequence was great. Now, I think that if I was 7 years old, I may be a little frightened at that sequence. But I think that this show is very good at keeping the scariest parts sparing enough that it's not traumatic to see something like that. It really just feels like the weight of that more scary part lands without it being like overly graphic or gory. So the next thing that happens, I thought was a little weird. I didn't understand why this happened. I did not remember this occurring in the book. But Matthias and the shrew guy that escaped and slayed Asmodeus, they're like walking back through the caverns to try to get out, and they come upon a bunch of like bones. And Matthias just starts swinging at the bones. And I was like, why is he doing that? They're bones. And there was no like real explanation for that. Like the shrew was like startled by them. So Matthias just was like swinging
Hacking
crazy.
away.
And I was like, why is he doing that?
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe he was just like sword happy because he finally got Martin's sword. it seemed unnecessary to me. I don't know. It wasn't even like meant to be like a comedic moment or anything, I don't think.
No, I definitely didn't get that impression. I kind of got the impression that it was like he didn't know if like it was dark, maybe he couldn't see.
I mean, he just slayed Asmodeus without issue.
Yeah, but like, how do you know he's the only bad guy there?
I guess.
Like,
I don't know. I just thought that was a little odd.
Yeah.
But I think episodes 12 and 13 really kind of finally feel back on track, and they feel
No, I thought it was because they were like trapped and they felt like they couldn't get out.
So he just swings at the bones?
I don't know.
That still doesn't make great sense.
No. Yeah, I don't know.
It's a weird moment. I don't know. Maybe Matthias was just like, practice. I don't know.
No, I don't think that was it either.
Who knows?
Yeah, who knows?
Anyway, so then we go into episodes 12 and 13, and I do feel like things finally get back on track. Matthias gets back. Everybody is very unified in the mission. And everybody's got their job, and everybody is now executing to the best of their effectiveness and ability and skill. And I think what happens is it does make that final battle feel very tense, very full of action. It did feel a little bit fast in regards to the pacing. However, I think with the fact that we really only had like an episode and a half by the time Matthias is back to kind of wrap all of that up, I felt like with the time that they had left, they did a pretty decent job. And I felt pretty satisfied by the end of episode 13 with how everything was kind of tied up in that bow. The epilogue that's present in the book was condensed quite a bit in the show, but I kind of expected that to happen, so I wasn't necessarily disappointed with that fact. It did leave, I think, a little bit less of a thread to grasp in regards to like further seasons. Now, I know that there are multiple seasons for this show. I cannot remember which books that they're based on. I haven't read any of the other books other than the original Redwall, but I felt like with the ending of Redwall, there was like a nice little thread that made it easy to pick up and like carry into another book. It didn't feel so much like that. It felt more conclusive, I guess, at the end, which is not necessarily a negative, I think. It was just a difference that I noticed. So overall, I felt like it kind of goes back to the same position I've held with this entire series, which is that when they are adapting from the source, like when they are pulling scenes from the source and they're adapting them, they do it pretty well, other than the fact that a lot of it feels very fast paced. But then when they create these new things, it just feels so unnecessary. So because of that, while I didn't necessarily dislike that episode, although I do have some character notes from that weird episode 9, I didn't dislike the episode. It wasn't like I was having a bad time watching. I just feel like it was just unnecessary fluff. And when you have a show this short, that filler, if you will, you can pick that up. The filler, if you will, feels just a little too unnecessary. I don't mind filler in big, large, massive shows. Like, you know, if anybody's an anime fan, that's like a big thing that happens in anime. But when you have 1,000 episodes, I don't care if you spend 3 on somebody's side story or whatever. Like, I don't really care. But when you have 13 episodes that are very short, it does feel like 2 of those 13 being used for whatever else, it just feels like an imbalance of that new creativity, I guess. So overall, good. Just some issues I had that I felt like were pretty weighty. So half credit, 1 out of 2 points.
Okay. So for me, for plot, story, and cohesion, I also give this 1 out of 2 points. So I agree with a lot of the same things that Tori has already said. I feel like overall, I didn't give this more than half credit because it feels like there is a lot of filler when we could have paced better throughout. So specifically in episodes 9, 10, and 12, I think there's a lot of filler that we could have taken a lot of that content and stretched it throughout the entire season instead of having these kind of laggy feeling moments of episodes where, like you said, we should have this kind of sense of urgency. We're getting to the culmination of the peak of all the conflict to finally have a good resolution. And now we're just having these like very sedate, like low energy moments. I think, to be fair though, this show was created and released before this like binge watching culture existed. So I do think it needs to be said that the way these episodes were meant to be digested, consumers should be digesting this with a whole week gap in between each episode.
Yeah.
And that's the way I digested it as a kid in watching the show, is every Sunday, it came on Sunday mornings while I was at church, and so we'd record it on the VCR, and I'd come home from church and watch it every Sunday. And I didn't have anything to continue until a whole week went by. And so I think an episode like episode 9 with the visitor, it doesn't feel as jarring when you've had a whole week after episode 8 and you're going to have a whole week before you get to episode 10. So I think that is something to be said, that binge culture is just so commonplace that we expect every form of media, especially television, to just be designed to be watched back to back to back to back versus week to week. And if you're a fan or collector, the DVDs were released of these shows and they're extremely expensive. They were extremely limited and they're really hard to find for the content that it is. I mean, a DVD of one of these seasons goes for upwards of like $200 to $300 USD on eBay. So they're extremely hard to get a hold of, and they weren't really released to mass market media when they came out.
All of the Redwall fans who have the DVD sets at home are now going, because they know they're sitting on a gold mine now.
But they were hard to find. It wasn't like you just went to Walmart and picked it up. It was, you had to kind of hunt for
Special order.
So I do have a lot of the same notes. This new plot line in episode 9, I think that there is benefit in the plot in the sense that we are continuing to see the impact of the siege, and I do like this bit of conflict we get to see between Matthias and Cornflower. Like I've kind of mentioned in prior episodes that we've discussed, they keep Matthias in the conflict at Redwall Abbey for the majority of the show, and this does continue throughout. Matthias is not out on a quest for the majority of this show. He is with the main cast of characters in the Abbey. The conflict between Matthias and Cornflower interpersonally, and then also this impact of Clooney convincing Farlow to kidnap Cornflower to get at Matthias because he sees Matthias as this warrior mouse, and then Matthias has to go and rescue her. It's really, when you think about it, it's the only damsel in distress and like heroic moment that Matthias gets in this whole show. Because the majority of the show, he's part of the Redwall community, and he is fighting against Clooney's plans, but he's not really fighting Clooney, and he's not really saving anyone. So I kind of like the plot overall, but it is an extreme deviation from the source material, and it does feel like it's a very odd place to have this in the show. It feels much more... It doesn't feel like it fits this close to the end of the story. I did think it was really weird that there's this magpie in episode 9 that is like spying and he doesn't talk. I'm like, I thought birds talk, the sparrows talk, but apparently not. And then when the rats capture Warbeak, which happens a little bit later, they're talking about eating Warbeak. This sounds like cannibalism to me. Like, do rats eat birds? I thought birds are like as sentient as they are. Like, are they cannibals? They just eat their own? Like, that was just very odd. I thought this was a very random thing to just kind of throw in there, this non-sentient magpie, this non-speaking magpie, and then rats eating a fellow woodlander.
It's like the rules of the world are muddled a bit.
Yeah, it just seemed very unusual. But I do think that plot overall works to help build some character development in Matthias, and we get to actually see him in this kind of warrior's bravery role, and we see that in Cornflower too, but I kind of attributed that more to characters, the character category of our score. Episode 10, Tori already talked about it. Yes, Matthias is finally going for Martin's sword. We know we only have, including episode 10, we only have 4 episodes left, and then it's like, just kidding, he's gonna turn around and go back. That happens so many times throughout the show, it's almost laughable. I also thought it was very odd that the core conflict of Clooney's goons is that they're tunneling again. Like, why?
I forgot to mention that, but like, I was watching this and I was like, this is either the weirdest deja vu or we already did this.
We did already do that. They did,
which
the tunnel.
I remember when it happened earlier. I made a comment. Why did they do this so early? This happens toward the end of the book. I didn't expect them to copy paste the same thing again.
Right. So I thought that was very odd. I felt like we were reusing that, even with the like the siege tower in the previous like season. It felt like a little bit of a rinse and repeat, but that's neither here nor there. We already talked about those episodes. I do like that the sparrows get to come and kind of return the favor. That favor returned concept, which is the title of that episode. I liked that. I thought it was a nice little bookend to the arc of the sparrows and their relationship with Matthias. I thought that was really nice. Episode 11, 12, and 13, I do feel like we finally get to what I think is the hallmark classic conflicts and hero moments of the book, of the source material.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to see Matthias find Martin's sword, get Asmodeus, and then finally defeat Clooney and the bad guys. And I thought that those aspects were done really well. And like Tori already kind of mentioned, I think they were done in an age-appropriate way as well. I think it's interesting that we actually spent time to show that the Shrews' little union, we get to see kind of the flaws of this straight democracy, that they can't come to a conclusive decision and make a decision because they all have equal say, and if they can't agree, then it just stagnates. I thought that was really interesting to like include that concept in a media format that is quote unquote juvenile. The fact that Clooney in episode 11 is building an army and like press ganging woodlanders into his army is again a really complex concept that I felt like could have been stretched throughout the story instead of just isolated to one episode.
Yeah.
Even with the Shrews, I felt like that could have stretched across multiple episodes. Episode 12, I like that we get to come back to Captain Snow. We kind of close that bookend, which is faithful to the book as well. I did have a problem when Matthias and Logolog are trying to figure out where they're supposed to go, and Matthias says, we're gonna go that way, and the shrew is like, well, how do you know that's the right way? And Matthias is like, well, how do you know that it isn't? I'm like, what is this? Like, this is just like, seems like very shaky dialogue.
I kind of felt bad for Logolog in that moment. Like, bro's just trying to get home.
Right. And then I also felt like the kind of concept that Martin's sword is not this magical item. I liked that we kind of talked about, we kind of highlighted the fact that this sword isn't some mystical, magical, fix the whole world magic wand, that it's the bearer of the sword that uses, strength and power and, warriorship for good. But then we kind of undo that and we're like, well, maybe the sword is magical. And I'm like, no. We don't need magical items. I think that's one of the core of Redwall, is that it is a fantasy world in the sense that these are talking animals, but these aren't individuals that have some kind of mystical magic wand that solves all their problems. It is them pressing against difficulty and hardship and overcoming the evil of the world with goodness and rightness. And I think that is what really should be the message of the show as an overall theme. So I like that we kind of started in that direction, and I think it was a little lame to kind of backpedal a little bit and be like, maybe the sword is magical.
Yeah.
No, it shouldn't be magical. Yeah, some like magical things happen in the sense that like Matthias has, and like Clooney has dreams about Martin, and Martin's like the spiritual, or Matthias is like the spiritual successor to Martin, and like, oh, his name just happens to match the I am that is spells Matthias. Oh, well, it's like, you know, I don't have a problem with this a little bit of a, you know, like the chosen one prophecy kind of aspect of it. But I personally think like I think the book as a source was very clear that like there is no mystical magic that's going to fix the problems. There's a little bit of like a use the force Luke kind of moment, but there's no like the sword is the magical MacGuffin that will save the world. It's no, Matthias being the warrior he's meant to be is what's going to save, you know, his community. And it's the every other individual is valuable and working towards that common goal, and they're just as important to the success of the Abbey dwellers as, you know, Matthias is. So anyways, that's just a little soapbox moment. I do like in episode 13 how we do, I like the way this show continues to highlight the impact of a siege, because I think a siege is a very difficult concept for very young audience members to understand, that being under siege is just as dangerous as being at sword point, because you don't have resources, you have a lack of food, you can't go out and forage. And I think the decision to have the show exhibit the fact that like this is the last of the food, like we're running out of resources, like we're gonna start starving if we don't find a way to overcome this siege. I think that's very important to highlight that for your young audience, even if it is a little bit spoon-fed to them, because I feel like I don't think the book failed to address it, but it wasn't as obvious that this siege really is still a life or death moment. Just because we're not being raided doesn't mean we're not having negative impacts of what Clooney's presence being. I did not like at all this repeat plotline again with Plumpin the Dormouse being the way that Clooney gets in.
Yep. Like
we just repeated again another plotline. We kind of repeated Farlow, and then with even with Sayla and Chicken Hound, we repeated that as well. Why are we just reusing plot lines? Again, I think you can argue, well, you know, if your 8-year-old watching week to week, they're not going to remember because that was 8 weeks ago. Like, no, come on, your audience is smart enough to kind of know that you're just using the same plot lines again. I didn't really like that as well. Clooney getting in, though, the final battle and how Clooney dies is really faithful to the book. They didn't have some epic lightsaber battle like, you know, Darth Vader versus Luke Skywalker. They had Matthias defeated Clooney in the exact same way that he defeats him in the book. And I really like that they kept that faithful to the adaptation. And then I also really liked the John Churchmouse's little epilogue. I thought that was a nice, like, bookend, a way to end it. And to kind of address your question, it does tie into the next season. Okay. So things that are said or addressed or characters that you kind of meet towards the end there, it continues into season 2, which covers the book Madameo, which is chronologically like the direct sequel to Redwall. And then the only other note I have, I just forgot it, so I'm kind of circling back a little bit to episode 12. That whole scene with the shrews in the waterfall, again, it felt like filler that we didn't need at this stage of the game. So because there's a lot of this filler, and I think we could have stretched things out and given a little bit more length across the season, instead of having these random moments in episodes where I feel like we're losing that momentum, was just a bit of a deficit in the plot of the story. So 1 point out of 2, but otherwise I think overall it's good media. Like, it's a good story. It's still good storytelling. It's just not as top tier as what I think it could be. And I think fans of the book will find aspects of it lacking as well. So 1 out of 2.
Okay. So the next category for TV shows is characters, and we allot up to 3 points. And I gave this 1.5 points. Again, middle of the road for me. let's talk about who the heck is Farlow and why is he here? And, okay, I get it. Like, the why he's here is he's a traveling merchant. That's just what he does. Okay, all right, who is he? He's apparently a man who is a man. He's a mouse or whatever he is. Dormouse. He is a dormouse that is incredibly easily swayed. And he agrees to this thing or whatever.
His wife was captured, Tori.
Let me get there. So he's swayed into this. His wife is kidnapped. He's like, crap, I gotta do this to get my wife back. And then he has this like, I screwed up. Oh no, I regret everything moment. Which, okay, like for a character of the week in a kid's TV show, that's fine. But it just goes to show that like, just because a character, I don't know. Let me compare him to the character of, what was her name? Ivy or something in episode 5. Ivy was like cool, right? So at least she's like memorable. But if I was like 7, 8 years old watching this, I would hate Farlow. Like, bro, yeah, I get it. But your wife was kidnapped. He's Italian and his wife was kidnapped and he had whatever. But it's like, he's such a like pushover weenie man, I guess, that I just was like, this whole episode is pointless to me. I think the only thing really of any merit is the thing that you mentioned with like, it gave Matthias a chance to kind of like save the girl, you know, and like have a little warrior moment. But like at the end of the day, like it almost barely like mattered in the regards of like Farlow and his wife. They showed up, this thing happened, Farlow was like, I regret everything, I'll help you. And then they went and they got the ladies and everybody just went home. Like, they were so, like, cardboard to me. And, like, I'm not expecting a lot, but, like, they didn't even feel like real people. Like, it almost just kind of felt like a weird fever dream. And I was like, oh, at the end of the episode, Cornflower's gonna wake up and be like, I hope I never get kidnapped by
an Italian dormouse.
Exactly. So it's like, I kind of expected it. Like, it didn't. Anyway, I'm not going to harp on Farlow. I did not like him or his wife. They made no big difference to me.
Don't get mad at his wife. She was the victim in this crime.
She said like 2 words all episode. So she hardly mattered too.
Do you remember what they were?
Nope.
Mamma mia.
Are you being for real?
No.
Oh. Everybody's gonna be so offended. All of our Italian fan base is gonna be like,
let's go. It's like Mario. You just quote Mario. Super Mario.
Anyway, I think the best characters in episode 9 are the 4 moles. I'm just gonna say that. They're the MVPs there.
They're pretty good. Yeah.
I did like that starting in episode 10, while I don't think that that's a great episode, I do think we finally get this moment where we get to see this sort of mental unraveling of Clooney. It's something that I talked about in the episode of our podcast where we discussed the book in its entirety. That moment, I think, is very significant to the character of Clooney, and it also starts a big domino effect in launching us into the final part of the book. And I think that I'm glad that episode 10 took a little bit of time for us to see that. All of the nightmares, sort of this lack of focus and judgment and all of these other things that we now see exhibited in Clooney. It's the final arc we need in his character to push us into that final siege and battle. And I like that we got that moment. Warbeak and the other bird whose name I forget, they're
Dunwing.
No, not her mother. The boy sparrow that like. So when
I can't remember what his name was, but
Warbeak gets captured by the rats, and then he kind of comes in and like informs the Abbey about what's going on. I did not remember that really happening in the book. It could have, but I didn't remember that bird specifically felt new to me.
I don't think that plot happened in the book.
Okay.
At all, to be honest. I think because Matthias wasn't there.
Yeah. I didn't mind him as a character, but he felt a little bit more like a plot device than like a character. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Like, we didn't get really any time to learn like who he was, how he feels, how he acts.
He's just for convenience.
He was just for plot convenience. So I just wanted to make note of that. Talking about the character design, we've touched on this in previous episodes, but there is a scene where Asmodeus is going by in the forest and he lifts his head up to look around and his body is as thick as the tree they are up in. And I was like, I've been to the zoo and I've seen some big snakes, and I've never seen a snake with a body as big around as a tree trunk like that. And those didn't look like little saplings to me. They looked like big rooted oaks or whatever they are. So I just felt like that was an issue.
Yeah.
He's way too large. But he didn't seem that large when we were in the caverns. It seemed inconsistent, the design and size of him. It just seems very inconsistent throughout the whole season. I also noticed that we did not, to my recollection, see baby Sam Squirrel until episode 12.
Yeah.
12!
Mm-hmm.
In the book, he's the first member of the squirrel family that we meet.
Yep.
And he didn't show up. We didn't even meet Dad. Dad didn't even exist in this. It was just Jess and baby Sam Squirrel.
Yep.
And I don't know where Mr. Squirrel was, but he didn't exist in this version. So I just thought that was very interesting and kind of maybe a missed opportunity to see another family dynamic that works together. I did think it was interesting that in the final battle, if you will, Father Abbott does kind of join the fight, which I can't decide if it felt like character growth, like he saw the need, or if it felt inconsistent to his character.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still undecided about that. I don't know if I ever will pick a side, but because Father Abbott has always taken the stance of, I will let you do what you think is right, but I will not fight. When he joined the fight, it felt inconsistent, but I didn't know if it was because now his mind has been changed, or he felt like the responsibility to help as he could in that moment. I was unsure about that. Another thing is that spoilers, okay? Father Abbott's death in the show, timing-wise, kind of feels like it replaces Methuselah's death.
Yeah,
because Methuselah's death in the book happens at the end, and they've done his death much earlier in this. So it feels like Father Abbott's death takes the place of that death. I didn't hate that choice, but I do wish it had, if I had my way, it would obviously be that Methuselah passes at the end, and not earlier. But I think that moment is needed just for the dynamic of the entire Abbey cast. And so I don't, again, it's just something that I wish was different. I don't think it was bad inherently, but I just wish it was different because of how the source material is. A lot of this comes from me. All my Redwall knowledge has been crammed into like 3 months. So it's all very fresh in my head. Mm-hmm. My final note is that we had all this filler, which we just talked about in plot, and yet we got no extra time with some of the smaller Abbey characters, like the otters. They never reappeared again, really, other than maybe in the background. Mm-hmm. And also, we never saw, what's his name? Mr. Porcupine. He showed up in the very first episode.
He's a hedgehog.
Hedgehog man.
Ambrose Spike.
He is seen, not heard, in the very first episode at the luncheon or whatever it is, where they caught the fish. He's seen, not heard, and we never see him again. And I was upset about that because I like Ambrose Spike in the book. I think he's a very fun character, and while he's not present through a ton of it, I think when he shows up with purpose and serves a role really well, and he's completely missing. Yeah. And
Friar Hugo too.
That's true. Yeah. Friar Hugo. Again,
because the two of them are like, Ambrose Spike is like the cellar master and Friar Hugo is like the head cook.
Yep.
And so it's like, we have a siege going on.
Yeah.
You would think that these two characters that have to feed and
And instead, it's
sustain.
It's all given to Cornflower.
Mm-hmm.
And so while I like that Cornflower has a bigger role in the show, I don't wish that it was at the expense of these other characters.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I just felt like with all of this filler time that we had, like, if we're going to create new plots, why don't we just go dive into the other characters at the Abbey and just see what they're doing? How are they coping? How are they feeling about this whole situation? I would have rather had a filler episode about that than Mr.
made-up character.
Yeah, Mr. made-up character whose wife got, captured by Clooney. Yeah. Like, Clooney's a bad guy. We already know that.
If you wanted to do that plot, you could have used an existing character.
Yeah, exactly.
You could have had it be Friar Hugo.
Yeah, he goes out to fish and gets captured or whatever.
John Churchmouse. We didn't see him for the whole show.
Right.
Until the very, very end.
So, again, the good things are good and the bad things are bad. And so very middle of the road again for me. Yeah. So 1.5 points out of 3.
Alrighty. So for characters, I actually give this 2 out of 3. So, and I think I touched a little bit on this in plot, but I think there is a lot more growth in Matthias in these last few episodes, and Matthias and Cornflower's relationship together specifically. And while I do agree with a lot of the points that Tori's made, especially about these new characters that are invented for the show, specifically episode 9, which the plot's completely fabricated for the show. Love it or hate it. But I do think it is a great episode to really dig into Matthias and Cornflower and their character together. And I think that having this moment with the two of them gives you some insight into who they are, specifically, especially Matthias, to where at the end, when he's fighting this like deadly, massive snake, it's not a moment in him that came out of nowhere. We've watched him kind of grow and have this kind of slower arc. And I think episode 9 is a really good episode to highlight that. I like that he has this moment in episode 9 where he's not keeping his word. He's blowing Cornflower off. He's promising to help her with things that are important for the maintenance of the Abbey while it's under siege. And then when Cornflower gets captured, he takes responsibility and ownership for her. He flat out admits, if I had kept my word and done what I was supposed to do and been there with Cornflower to help the inventory, she wouldn't have been captured. And I like that none of the other characters are like, no, Matthias, the bad people do bad things, and just because you weren't there doesn't make you responsible for bad people doing bad things, which there is some truth in that argument, but I feel like that's such a common cop-out in a lot of modern media stories where, no, you still have agency and responsibility. If you had been responsible and kept your word, yeah, Cornflower wouldn't have been left alone with Farlow and been able to be captured by him and taken, out of the Abbey and into Clooney's, clutches. So yeah, you kind of, you are not, you didn't do the evil act, but your negligence contributed to setting up this situation. Yeah. And I like that nobody gives him an out or makes him feel better. They're like, yeah, you made a mistake, but now it's time to step forward and do the right thing. And he does. I like that we get to see these consistent moments in him through these last 4 or 5 episodes where he's brave and he's standing for what's right and for justice. Episodes, 10 through 12, especially, we get to watch him be clever. He takes time to, really think through the process of, going and finding Martin's sword, of negotiating with Captain Snow, of being there with the shrews and engaging with them. He really is stepping into this role of leadership and to this kind of warrior's role, which in the context of Redwall, we're kind of seeing that the warrior isn't just like the big muscle with the sword, but it's also someone that has to be standing for justice and standing for what's right and being able to relate to other people and to negotiate with others and to be in a role of leadership and not just the muscle with the sword being a bully to people that don't agree with you.
Yeah.
And so I think that we get a lot of this roundness into what Matthias as a warrior is supposed to look like long term, and we get to see him assume that role even in small ways. And so I think that that's a really good growth that we get to see in Matthias as he takes his place to be Redwall's warrior and defender, and not just, I know how to sword fight now and I can beat people up if they mess with my friends. Like, that could have been a very gross oversimplification of what Redwall's warrior is supposed to be, and I like that we're seeing a little bit more complexity into who Matthias is as a leader. So I think that is the biggest reason why I gave this a little bit more than halfway, because I think up until this point, we haven't really gotten to see Matthias assume that role as an up-and-coming leader of Redwall Abbey, more than just like the guy with Martin's sword.
Yeah.
So I thought that was done really, really well. Cornflower's bravery, I think, is also highlighted really, really well in episode 9. Although I don't particularly care for the plot, I think that even when Cornflower is afraid, she admits being afraid, but she still does the brave thing. As an adult, watching this little girl, which she is not an adult, she is a girl mouse rotating on a water wheel, holding her breath so she doesn't drown, and maintaining that courage and bravery in the face of this evil rat to come up with it. That's impressive. Like, that is a really impressive demonstration of Cornflower being just as brave as Matthias, and yet so easy to forgive him and overlook his faults and allow him the opportunity to make things right and apologize, and not just be completely turned off from him and, wanting ill will towards him because this was all your fault anyways. Yeah. We don't have this big falling out between Matthias and Cornflower from these events. We get to watch them both kind of grow and push through it. I like that she's clever enough to find Martin's armor. She does have a little bit of this damsel in distress moment, but I don't mind it because she's not this constant damsel that keeps causing her own misfortunes. Mm-hmm. She's the victim of an unfortunate circumstance, and then we get to watch her still kind of push through and do what she can do to help Matthias, to help the Abbey, finding Martin's armor and then warning Matthias because she sees he's about to run into Clooney. All of that, we get to see her kind of stepping into a role, not necessarily as a warrior in the same way that Matthias is, but we do get to see this kind of warrior spirit in her that we see as kind of a more mature audience. We get to see why they are a good fit for each other because they're natured very well together and they complement each other very well. So I think that also is really good character development in these few episodes for our two, really main protagonists / love interests, without it turning into this like sickly, sappy, sweet romance throughout the rest of the show, which I think would have been really low-hanging fruit to grab for. Our other main cast of characters, I love that we get these little moments where we get to continue to see them do really well. Basil, when he goes to rescue Warbeak, I like that Constance and the Abbot both support Matthias to protect the Abbey, and I love this contradicting perspective between the two of them where the Abbot thinks that Clooney's going to get tired and he's going to leave, versus Constant, who acknowledges Clooney's never going to leave. He's never going to leave. He has no reason to just give up and walk away. And so their perspective of what the villains will do is very different. And it's pretty common with, I think, real human outlooks on life, is that, a skeptic versus an idealist is going to view those circumstances differently. And I think it's the fact that these two individuals are kind of like the surrogate parents of Redwall can have those differing opinions and still work together towards that common goal. And so that's just very consistent throughout the whole show. And I like that maintains consistency. You kind of already talked about this unraveling of Clooney, so I won't go over that. But I love that stays true to the book, and that even though when Clooney is losing his mind, he is still just as wicked. He, kidnaps Cornflower again in the bell tower, and then, Matthias is clever enough to, get Clooney to let her go, and then Matthias, severs the bell, and that's how Clooney's defeated. And so this kind of mental game between the two of them, in addition to kind of the physical conflict of the final battle, I think is done really well. Warbeak, I love that she stays in the show to the end, and that she does have this kind of true camaraderie and friendship with Matthias. But not all of the characters are done as well or consistently. I do think we'd lose a lot of our minor characters that have just fallen to the wayside. I think Farrell the Dormouse, I think he is pretty likable, even when he's kidnapping Cornflower, and I think he does have this little bit of a redemption arc at the end. But then we just repeat that whole thing again with Plumpin in episode 13, which I think is really dumb. And I think that these kind of extra characters that are thrown in just aren't very good. I don't really like the shrews. I think they're annoying as characters. I think we could have left them out of the whole story and it would have been fine. Captain Snow and Squire Julian kind of come in at the end. I think they're really weak and flat characters. Although I do like that plot-wise we get that bookend again. They're just really, really flat. I think Gowsam as the shrew leader dies, which to me just felt like a kind of a who cares moment because we didn't have time to dig into these people and know who they are. We've just watched the shrews argue with each other and get nothing done. And so then when their leader dies, I mean, death should be sad, but I'm like, okay, I don't really care because we didn't really spend a ton of time getting to know these shrews and watching them, make any kind of movement to get your audience to buy in and root for them. Whereas if Warbeak died, we would all be really sad. Not that I think that she should have died in this show, but there's just a very difference in giving us buy-in to these characters. And I think that a lot of these minor characters are just really flat and, kind of like Tori mentioned with one of the sparrows, they seem more like plot convenience characters. Like the young shrew that's I know where Redwall is. It's that way. And they're just making stuff up. Why do we have this character here? We could have had anybody fill that role. It was just kind of a fabricated character that just shouldn't have even really been there. So again, they're not perfect characters, but I think a lot of the growth that we see in Matthias and Cornflower is why I gave it more than half credit. So 2 out of 3 for me.
Okay. So category 3 is aesthetics, and out of 2 points, I gave this full 2 points because I still think that this is really where this show shines. It still has so much of its charm. I'm such a fan of the 2D animation. Now, I don't think it's perfect by any means, but I didn't have any complaints that warranted taking off anything. I really like that if you pay attention there are the best way I could describe these would be transition scenes, transitions, and they are of the tapestry, and it updates to show us what's been going on in the show or what just happened in the show. And I think that is a wonderful touch. I love the quality of the tapestry and how it truly looks like real fabric with all of that embroidery and the threadings. I love that so much. I really appreciated a lot of the sound being mixed in a good way, including things like echo in the caves, their appropriate distance mixing. Somebody who's right next to you talking to you in a normal voice is going to sound different to your ears than somebody who's calling at you from across the way. And they do a lot of really good sound mixing in regards to proper distance, which I thought was nice. I like other small details, like when Captain Snow sees Matthias's sword and the metal literally makes glints off of his eyes. A detail they did not have to make. Mm-hmm. And yet I just thought it was such a nice animation detail. I also really like the design of the full armor that Matthias puts on at the end. It could have been a moment of haha, humor, you don't know how to wear armor. I like that they did not go that route. And it really did feel very grand and epic and fitting for Matthias to come toward Clooney in the full armor and, establish that sort of assertion and authority at that moment that, you are doing something evil and I am here to correct that. And I thought that the design of that whole scene was just so beautifully done. that whole scene into the defeat of Clooney, I think, is just such a wonderful sequence in regards to animation. Every shot, the actual setup of a shot feels very cinematic and real, like it's something through an actual camera that's being captured. And I think that when you are watching an animated film, when you forget that it's fake for a moment, even if it's just for a moment, I think that that is a win in animation, and that the animators should be praised for that, because it's so easy, I think, to kind of, disconnect ourselves from reality when we're watching animation. And so when there's those small moments that feel so real, I think those are worth talking about. Everything's very consistent. I don't have a lot to say other than I just think it's so good all the way around. The only negative that I really wanted to talk about, but I still didn't take any points off, is that when Matthias and the shrews are falling underground into the caverns, as they fall, they did not get any smaller. And I was like, they'll mix the sound to make it sound like they're getting farther, but they're not animating them to get smaller as if they're getting farther away from the camera's point of view. I thought that that was a problem, but it wasn't enough for me to pull off half a point or more. So again, I don't have a lot to hash out, just consistently good in many ways. And I think that, if you are a fan of 2D animation, you would find a lot of charm in watching Redwall, especially with what I suppose is a smaller budget than, a Disney animated show or something like that. I think they do very well with what they're given. So a full 2 out of 2 points for aesthetics.
Alrighty, so I gave this 1.5 points out of 2 for aesthetics. I agree with a lot of the things you said. I just did have a few moments where I felt like I was a little bit pulled from the
immersion.
I like this mill location we get, this new visual, the wheel turning, even the millstone turning in the mill, I think was really good. I think that whole scene where Cornflower's on the water wheel and is like spinning around, that could have been an extremely intense scene. That whole concept could have just been extremely distressing and almost too intense for young viewers, and I felt like they kept it very age appropriate. The lighting, the tone, the score, everything was kept, and it wasn't lightened in the sense that now you don't care or there's no gravity to what's happening, but it was lightened in a sense that I think it was kept very age appropriate, where it's not so intense that now your blood pressure's going up while you're watching this scene. The score, I think, is just really consistently good, especially with Logalog's intro. I love the way the score kind of changes a little bit to be this more like, almost like, I think there's like a little bit of a tin whistle in there, and it's like a little Irish woodsy kind of sound versus the grandness of Redwall Abbey. It sounds a little bit more just like earthy and like humble sounding. And so I like the way that the tone changed a little bit to give us a little bit more of a feel for who these characters are. Asmodeus's design, especially in the tunnel, I love the creature design of Asmodeus. I think just the way that they created his the pattern of his scales and the size and intensity for that final battle, I thought was done really well. The way that there's fog in the woods at night, it looks like they've overlaid something over the cell animation. I don't know if they used digital tools to animate this show. I would guess maybe they did, because this was created in the late 90s. Maybe there were some digital elements that were used, but it looks really good. Like the fog moves and flows the way you would expect real fog to move, and I thought it was done really well. I like that the color temperature changes at night so that we get more of those darks, like purples and blues, versus the brighter, yellows and greens when it's daylight. The cave design, I like that there's variation in the color of the stone. We didn't just have everything gray or everything brown inside the tunnels. We have different tones of browns and orange and purples and grays to kind of give us variety of colors. The cinematography of everything, I think, is done really well. When Clooney sees Martin's armor and, for the first time, it's very cinematic. Just the edits and like cuts back and forth of how Clooney's kind of madness is unraveling and he's seeing this figure from his nightmares. I thought it was really good. The final battle with the lightning and the shadow work of that is very cinematic with Matthias and Clooney. Clooney's invasion into the Abbey and the whole scene in the bell tower, I think, is done really, really well. I did think that the combat with the Abbey tunnel, when they're like laying out to the, they're staking out where they think Clooney's going to come out, and like the whole part when they break through, that whole scene of combat there, I thought was a little goofy looking. It's like it wasn't, it's like the shots and the scene where Matthias is fighting Asmodeus, I felt like there were too many wide shots that just felt like you were watching it from really, really far away. And I wish that there were more close-ups and more cinematic angles. We were kind of down into the combat with our cast versus just watching like a coloring book of the battle. And so I did feel like that the climactic battle with Matthias and Asmodeus, I was like, I feel like they're really far away and I wish I had more cinematic shots instead of these really wide shots. It made it look a little corny to me, and I feel like that's a really important part. I also really found it distracting in the tunnels when they're underground, so which is like almost all of episode 11 and almost all of episode 12. That green color that they use in the tunnel, to me, is just garish. It is just hideous to look at. It's like highlighter green, and I get that this is like the layer of poison teeth or whatever, but like, come on. Like, I would rather have it this dark, earthy tones with, green with a little bit more brown in it or gray in it versus this like lime offensive green that's like, look at the water. It's like Chernobyl instead of a tunnel for a snake to live in.
I wonder if they were trying to emulate the fact that like there's psychology behind color temperature and how like fluorescents are green, and sometimes like in film they would like choose to like lean into that fluorescent color temperature in order to make you feel like unsettled or uneasy. I don't know if maybe it was like a choice that.
It really could have been, and I wouldn't fault them for trying, but I think the execution, to me, that whole time I was like, what am I watching? Like, where is this tunnel? This is like radioactive goo. Is it the Ninja Turtles now? Or they're gonna come cowabungaing out of this water now? Like, I felt like I was in watching a completely different show, because everything else felt so organic and earthy and, medieval in the tone of it. And it would be one thing if it's like, okay, like if you haven't seen it, this is not a spoiler, but in Avatar: The Last Airbender, when they go into the Cave of Two Lovers, and it's like there are moments, this is not a spoiler, there are moments where you understand that there are like phosphorescent or naturally glowing aspects of the tunnel that provide bioluminescent light. It didn't even match that kind of color. Like, that kind of color palette, if it was like there are some otherworldly light sources in this tunnel, it would be like, glowing algae in the pool, or like rocks that just glow on their own. Like, I don't think it would be that garishly green. It was like a fauve green. And I was like, what? Where is this coming from? Because to me, it didn't feel like it fit the world or the setting. It kind of pulled me out of it. And that was probably my least favorite visual of the whole show. Like, the entire show, when they got into the tunnel and there's like this lime green pool, I'm like, what am I watching? This is horrible. Who picked this color? Like, tone it down a little bit. But otherwise, I agree with a lot of the points Tori made. I do think the visuals really are nice in this show. I do think there are, like you mentioned, I had also in this category, I thought there were a few scale issues with Asmodeus, like him being the same width as, or same circumference diameter as a tree.
Yeah.
It was a little bit like, whoa, hold on now.
Yeah.
How big is this snake? But overall, I really like the visuals of the show, and it's very charming. And I think overall it holds up really well. For a lot of cartoons, quote unquote, in the 90s and 2000s, I think some of them don't hold up very well, but I think this one absolutely does. So 1.5 out of 2.
All right, so category number 4 is personal taste and preference. We allot 2 points for this, and I kind of went back and forth, and I ultimately settled on 1.5 points because honestly I enjoyed myself. Like, we critique because that's what we do on the show. Like, our goal here is to be objective and talk about things, but I really enjoyed myself and I'm happy overall. And I would like to dive in more to the world of Redwall, but ultimately I think I may prefer the books. Just comparing Redwall the book to Redwall the show, I'm thinking that overall my enjoyment is going to be magnified if I were to go through more of the books as opposed to going through more of the show. Now, the show is easier to consume. It takes less time. I think it's generally less brain work to watch a show than it is to read a book. So if I were feeling lazy, maybe the show would be the option. But I think if I were trying to maximize my enjoyment of the Redwall world, it would need to be through the books. So coming to that realization is why I didn't give it full points for the finale here of the show, and just kind of scaled it back to 1.5 points.
Alrighty, so for me, out of a total score of 2, I gave this 2 out of 2 full points for me. So nostalgia still carries a lot of weight for me in the show. Even though I'm well past the age bracket, this show just scratches an itch for me. It satisfies that draw to me of noble woodlanders banding together against medieval villains without magic or superpowers, just brave warriors one and all. So 2 out of 2 for me.
Awesome. And then our final category is creativity, where we allot 1 point, and I gave this a full point because I think this is a great taste of a new concept on PBS at the time. It's something that we've talked about previously. I think it holds up really well. I think that as kids nowadays, I'm going to say this the nicest way that I know how, and maybe it's a very like old person take of me to have as I get older, but I feel like in today's children's media, there's a smaller pool of TV shows that I would actively recommend to children. It's not necessarily anything against current children's media, but I feel like the focus of children's media in the last, 10, 15 years has shifted from age-appropriate storytelling to just entertainment. And I think that seeing that shift happen as I've gotten older and kind of aged out of children's media, but still like consuming it, because, whatever, I feel like you can be an adult and enjoy children's media. But I've noticed this shift happening over the last decade or so. And this is a show that, granted, we're coming up on 25 years now that this show has been around, or since its first airing, and this is a show that I would still recommend. But there are shows from 5-10 years ago of children's media that I think don't hold up and could be passed over. So I feel like the true test of time in regards to creativity comes down to, does its appeal last? I think that's a huge facet of creativity. And I think with Redwall, it certainly does. So that's why I wanted to give it a full point for creativity.
Yeah, I really agree. I also gave this full points for creativity. I think the show is a faithful adaptation to the source material, even where it deviates. And given that there are so few shows of this content and caliber in this age bracket that don't completely ruin the original creator's work, I'm looking at you, Netflix's Avatar: The Last Airbender, I think this earns full credit for creativity. So almost exactly the same sentiment as what you said. So yes, 1 out of 1 for me. So what was your final score?
Final score for me came to 7.
And my final score for episodes 9 through 13 are 7.5 out of 10.
All right.
If our personal taste and preference were the same, we would have the same score.
That's true.
Alrighty. Any final thoughts?
Nope.
Alrighty. What are you? Blah. Are you ready for some
Lightning round?
lightning round
Yes.
questions? I think it's funny we call this lightning round, but we never are like, quick, answer fast.
Yeah,
It's just
it's really not. Maybe we should rename it.
no. At this point,
Okay. It's just what it is now.
yeah. Alrighty. So, what was your favorite episode of these 5 episodes?
Probably 13, the finale.
Yeah.
It's good. It wraps up well. It's everything I wanted.
Yeah, I would say so too. Episode 13 was pretty good. Who was your favorite and least favorite character in these episodes?
I think my favorite is still Cornflower.
Mhm.
She just grows into a great character. Least favorite.
You have to think about it.
I mean, it's all of Clooney's dumb goons.
You're not
still.
gonna say Farlow?
Oh yeah, Farlow. I hate him. See, I hate him so much. I just forgot he existed.
You just wiped him out of your memory.
Farlow sucks. He didn't need to exist.
All right. My favorite character is Matthias. My least favorite character is probably the Shrews collectively.
Okay.
They're so annoying.
I don't mind the Shrews.
Yeah, not a big fan. I like them in the book though. They're fine in the book, but in this show, man, that little girl Shrew, she's my least favorite. She's so annoying.
Redwall's that way.
Yeah.
Or whatever she said.
Shut up, kid. You don't know anything. What did you think was the best and worst, or it could be your most or least favorite adaptation from the book?
Best adaptation is Clooney's defeat, I think. Worst adaptation, I am going to not choose the fact that Farlow even exists. I'm just gonna skip that. But the fact that Matthias left and came back multiple times.
Yeah.
I hate that.
Yeah.
Just go away.
Just leave, Matthias.
That way we can celebrate your return instead of being like, oh, again?
Yep. I think I would agree with both of your points, actually. I think it was so frustrating. Oh, no. Oh. Another least favorite adaptation. I think my favorite adaptation would probably be the end where Clooney's defeated at the end. Probably my least favorite adaptation would either be Matthias like leaving and coming back over and over again, or the tunneling part 2. Like,
True.
we didn't need tunnel part 2. We did tunnel part 1 in like episode 2.
Yeah.
Why are we doing it again?
Or Clooney snuck in part 4.
Yeah,
or
part
whatever.
6.
Yeah.
Yeah. What change would you make to the season overall? So, all 13 episodes. What change would you make?
All 13?
Over the whole season.
I really wish that we could just have the events in the sequence that they happened in the book. Even if we expand or constrict the time spent on it, it's just confusing to do the tunnels and then do the tunnels again. And then do, Matthias is leaving for the quest. No, he's not. So like all of these little things that feel like we're going to, Methuselah dying so early, all of these things, it's like we're going to make this decision and then it feels like we've retroactively realized that was not a good decision, so we got to do it again or do it with somebody else. I just think it feels like as they were animating, they were like, crap, we did this already, but now where it's supposed to happen, we have to just do it again. And it just felt like poor planning maybe, or poor storyboarding for the season overall. So if everything had just stayed in sequence, I wouldn't have had a problem with those moments, I think.
Yeah. I think they should have kept... I would agree, and I think that kind of in the same vein as that, so I won't steal your answer, but I think I would have Matthias on a quest.
Yeah.
I would have kept Matthias's quest in there, and maybe have him run into a character like Farlow or a character like Ivy, and like introduce these new characters for Matthias along the way to give him a little bit more fleshed out growth and have him, learn warrior skills along the way. But I think having him in the crux of the Abbey, it makes it feel like he doesn't even need to have Martin's sword, because what do they need it for if they're just gonna Like,
I think it also limits the growth of some of the other core Abby characters
Mhm.
because they don't need to do it. Matthias is here.
right.
You know what I mean? So characters like Constance and Basil, while they're good characters and we do see some growth throughout the season, I think that they could have been given more opportunity to shine because
Yeah.
they had to step up because Matthias wasn't there
Right.
or whatever.
Yeah, definitely. What other children's media would you like to see as a TV show in this animation style?
Oh boy. This is a very different genre, but it was a kid's book series that I liked when I was young. It was a more comedic series, but I grew up reading the Junie B. Jones books.
I never read those books.
And there was like, I don't know, like 22 or 23 of them. And I mean, they were not hard books. They were easy chapter books. I'd say they were designed for ages like 6 to 12 maybe. And it's a very comedic sort of like lesson of the week type books where it's like Junie B. Jones got herself into something and so now she's got to learn the lesson or of the week or whatever. And so that's kind of how those books functioned, and there was a lot of humor to them and like a little bit of goofiness, and so they were entertaining as well. And I think something like that would be nice to see adapted into like a 2D animation style like that.
Yeah. I think I would like to see some of the Beverly Cleary books.
Oh, like Ramona and
Except I would pick the first Beverly Cleary book I ever read was The Mouse and the Motorcycle.
Oh, okay.
And so I would like The Mouse and the Motorcycle and like Ralph S. Mouse and the ones about Ralph the Mouse. Because I think that would translate really well into animation. And then I think you could say, and the Ramona books, because I think...
Henry Huggins books.
Yeah, or Henry Huggins books, which I read the Henry Huggins books before I ever read any of the Ramona books. But I think also in this animation style, it would be nice because your cast of characters don't have to stay that age.
Yeah.
So your animation lends you the opportunity to have, recast your voice actors and keep your kids eternally youthful, and you could have it last as long as you wanted to.
Yeah,
so
very true.
I think I would pick her books, but I would say specifically I'm gonna not pick the Ramona books or the Henry Huggins books because I know those are a little bit more commonplace, and I would say the Mouse and the Motorcycle books.
That's a good pick.
So of the titles of the rest of the Redwall books, which are on my shelf over there off camera, which one sounds the most interesting for a next season? And Tori has no idea what any of these books are about. So she has not read any of them. So you're only going on titles.
One of the most interesting titles, in my opinion, is The Pearls of Lutra. That one sounds very interesting to me.
Mm-hmm.
And there's one down here. Eulalia?
Mm-hmm.
That one also sounds interesting just by title alone.
Yeah. Yep. I will go ahead and say the book on there, Madameo and Martin the Warrior, are seasons 2 and 3 of this show. So that is not a spoiler.
So it's like sequel and then prequel, kind of?
Pretty much. I think I have not read all of the Redwall books, but I have read a lot of the Redwall books. And I personally would want to see Tagarung as a season, which it's kind of a standalone story, but that's the one I would pick because that one's one of my favorites.
Nice.
Or I also I am slowly rereading through the books, and I'm on Muriel of Redwall right now, and I really like that book, so I would pick that one as well. So
nice.
I'd pick those two. If you could invent a topic for a new Redwall season, what would you like to see?
I don't think I understand the question.
So they're going to make a new season of Redwall. Make a season 4 of Redwall. Okay. And you don't have a book to base it off of. You can just invent whatever you want as the new season of Redwall. What would you like to see in the story?
So with no other...
It could be about characters that you know. Yeah, you could invent new characters.
So I don't know if any of this is addressed in another book. So if it is, I apologize. But I would love to see the origin of how each of the Abbey characters got to the Abbey. And like what their backstory is, what their family situation was. Why are they here? Whatever. Like I want to know how Constance got there. And what I want to know more about the backstory between Basil Staghair and Captain Snow. So like characters that we've met in Redwall, I want to know like who they are, like from the beginning to now.
Origin stories.
Yeah, origin stories. I would want a collection of origin stories.
Yeah. I think I would make a new cast of characters for Redwall. And I would probably pick I think I would pick, well, again, I'm going to pretend that I don't know anything about other books. So this is just what I would invent. But like, I think, you know, Redwall takes place in like the Middle Ages. So it's kind of like medieval. I would say like fast forward in time to like maybe like 1700s when we have like pirate era. And I would say, you know, let's have Redwall pirates.
Okay. Very interesting.
And so it's not Redwall Abbey. So it would take place in the same world, but it would be like, you know, pirate Redwall.
Nice.
With like cannons and pistols would be the max technology that we would advance to. So no like, you know, crazy, you know, space blasters or anything. We're like, you know,
you're not
machine
doing futuristic.
guns. No, we're not going that far, but just like in like colonial era like technology.
Okay.
So that's what I would pick.
Very cool.
Or like Redwall in the New World. And so it like takes place in like Redwall takes place in like Europe or Great Britain.
Now it's like
England. And I would switch it over to like
colonial America.
The Americas. Yeah. And it would be like American woodland creatures that exist. So there'd be like Brian Jakes, this fun fact for you, you know, fans. Brian Jakes was adamant that the only animals that exist in Redwall are ones native to where he lives, which is England, or you know, he's not alive anymore, but where he lived when he was writing, which was Great Britain and England. And so I would say let's have American Redwall and let's have American animals, but it would still be the same, like, you know, so then we could have like raccoons and coyotes and, you know, all kinds of.
Are skunks an American animal?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know
some
if
skunks in there.
I don't know of any skunks in Redwall. So yeah, that's what I would pick.
Cool.
Yeah. Any final thoughts?
Nope. I enjoyed myself.
Alrighty. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us on this episode. We hope you had a good time because we sure did. If you would like to let us know what we should review next, you can leave us a comment on our YouTube video, leave us a comment on Spotify. We read all of those. We also have a suggestion box on our website where you can reach us. Our website is lionandmousepodcast.com, and so you can make a suggestion of us there, or for us there. If you would like to and want to help us out, you can leave us a 5-star review. I know every podcaster on the planet asks for that, but it really does help. Also, if you're on YouTube, do all the YouTube things like comment, subscribe, etc. It's not us trying to feed our own ego. It just helps us reach as many people as possible. It helps the algorithm know that you like what we do and hopefully recommends us to other people as well. It just helps expand our reach. Anything you guys want to do to support is always much appreciated to us. So links to our show notes, socials, Patreon, etc. are all available on our website, lionandmousepodcast.com. But thank you guys so much for listening. Just listening is all the support that we need from you guys. Thank you so much. We will catch you in the next one.